It had been about 3 days since I lost contact with Kenneth when I suddenly got a call from my mother-in-law. "If you move in with us, I'll tell you where my son's new house is. He's earning $8,000 a month." Who's making $8,000 a month? I couldn't believe what mother-in-law was saying. Kenneth must have been bragging and lying again. I kept silent because he didn't want to worry me, but I'm not going to continue being married to Kenneth and be made a fool of like this. "Then I guess it's divorce with my husband who actually earns $800, I said. "Don't lie." Mother-in-law laughed loudly on the other end of the phone. "Well, I'm not bothered by her misunderstanding. I'll send the divorce papers tomorrow," I said. "You'll struggle with your poor life, not me." Goodbye. I hung up the phone, leaving mother-in-law in her triumph. After hearing about the divorce from mother-in-law, Kenneth started calling me repeatedly, so I decided to block his number. I wonder who'll end up regretting this. I savored my tea, enjoying my newfound freedom. I'm looking forward to what lies ahead for us three. I'm Harper, a 48-year-old tax accountant. My parents passed away early, but I took over the tax office my dad left behind, and have been working hard every day. I met my husband Kenneth at a university club. He was 3 years younger than me and kept asking me out, but I wasn't very interested. However, his persistence continued, even after graduation, and I finally gave in, and we started dating. Kenneth won over my parents with his cheerful personality, and everything went smoothly, leading to our marriage. My in-laws never liked me. First, because I was older, and also because I was a tax accountant, as Kenneth told me. They were initially opposed to Kenneth being adopted into my family. However, their attitude changed abruptly in favor of the marriage when my dad suddenly passed away and I decided to take over the tax office. The wedding was held at my expense, a traditional affair. I never had a good impression of my in-laws because of this. Kenneth, for his part, never stood up to the sarcastic remarks from the in-laws and only apologized to me afterward, which was not very reliable. When our marriage was about to hit the 5-year mark, my mom suddenly passed away. She had been living in a nursing home and apparently developed pneumonia from a cold. She was never physically strong and eventually passed away without recovering, joining my dad in heaven. I managed to be there for her last moments, but Kenneth, citing work reasons, arrived only after she had passed away.
"Ah, I didn't make it in time. What a pity. A pity,"
Kenneth said nonchalantly. I just stared at him, unable to believe what he said. Not only had Kenneth been taken care of by Dad, but also by Mom. What an ungrateful man. Kenneth, with a carefree smile, brought up the subject of inheritance.
"Well, the office and our family home are already yours, right, Harper? What about the savings? How much is there? I really want a bike."
Indeed, Mom had quite a substantial amount of savings. Enough for a couple to live comfortably without luxury. But I didn't want to let a man who talked about wanting things right after Mom's death use my parents' hard-earned savings. "There's a bit, but hardly anything left," I lied. "Besides, where would you even keep a bike?"
"Just rent a nearby parking space. Or are you planning to hog all the inheritance?"
Kenneth glared at me, his face filled with anger. With a click of his tongue, he left the hospital. That night, Kenneth didn't come home and was unreachable. He always does this when we argue. Feeling fed up with his childish behavior, I reluctantly called the in-laws' house. "Hello? Oh, Harper, I heard you're trying to keep all of Mom's inheritance for yourself." I knew instantly from my mother-in-law's first words that my suspicions were correct. "I have no intention of keeping it all, but I want to use Mom's inheritance carefully." "You're not the one to decide that. How presumptuous for a wife." I couldn't understand mother-in-law's logic. Why was it presumptuous for me, her daughter, to decide how to use Mom's inheritance? I answered, trying to contain my anger. "Anyway, I'll decide how to use Mom's inheritance. If Kenneth can't accept that, I'm thinking of divorce." "Divorce?" After mother-in-law's shrieking voice, I heard Kenneth's panicked voice from the other end of the phone. Then, after a while, mother-in-law softened her tone. "Harper, calm down. I'll send Kenneth back tomorrow. Talk it over, okay?" "Yes." Arguing with mother-in-law any further wouldn't change anything, so I responded shortly to end the conversation. "That's good. It's just both of you got heated. I think you'll understand each other if you talk. Kenneth is reflecting on it, too." Is that so? My displeased tone seemed to make mother-in-law anxious. In fact, I've been sending about $2,000 a month to my in-laws. Mother-in-law seemed frightened that this might stop if we divorced. That night, Kenneth stayed at his parents', and I had a peaceful rest at home. The next morning, Kenneth came home early and apologized deeply as soon as he saw me.
I'm sorry. I really wanted that bike and acted badly without considering your feelings.
Kenneth has always been impulsive and couldn't resist his immediate desires. He was also a spendthrift, so I somewhat understood and accepted his explanation. If something like this happens again, it's an immediate divorce. And stop running to your parents' house every time we fight. It's me who ends up getting scolded by your mom.
I'm sorry. Why didn't I divorce them then?
I only regret it now, but back then, I believed Kenneth would change. However, he started to behave strangely around this time. First, he began coming home late. Then, he started caring about his appearance, something he had previously neglected. I was busy with work, so I didn't notice these changes until around the 10th year of our marriage.
I quit my job.
What? Why? Kenneth, who I faced across the dinner table for the first time in a while, nonchalantly announced it while sipping his soup. I nearly dropped my plate in shock.
You're doing well, aren't you? You've even been on TV lately, so I don't need to work anymore.
That's not how it works. Even if things are good now, who knows about the future? Kenneth frowned at my words, but he quickly put on a sardonic smile and pointed at me with his fork.
Tax accountants can find work anywhere. I want a job where I feel more needed, so I'm going to find myself.
I was astonished. I hadn't touched Mom's inheritance. It was still intact. Honestly, even if my business declined, I thought we'd be secure until our old age. I never expected Kenneth to quit his job. I hadn't even told him how much Mom's inheritance was. He was clearly relying on my income. Partners should help each other in hard times. But I had never heard Kenneth talk about job troubles or anything like that. Currently, I do all the housework and bear a larger share of the living expenses. And now he expects me to pay all the living expenses and support him too? The thought of divorce strongly crossed my mind. What about living expenses?
Well, I'll do part-time work.
As long as you contribute the same amount as before.
That's impossible. I'll contribute $500 to the house.
Kenneth's words gave me a headache. We each had been contributing $1,000 a month. The idea that he would contribute only half as much as usual was unbelievable. What was he thinking?
All right, that's settled then. I have plans with friends, so I'm off.
Wait a minute. Kenneth abruptly ended the conversation and left to hang out. Because Kenneth's words occupied my mind, I made many mistakes at work that day and had to work overtime. Taking advantage of this, Kenneth's return time got later and later. When I pointed it out, instead of reflecting, he got angry. After starting his part-time job, Kenneth stopped doing any housework, saying he was too tired. He started living like a student, going out late and returning just to sleep. How long do you plan to continue this lifestyle? Do your parents know about this?
Hey, don't tell my parents, okay? It'll worry them.
But... At my words, Kenneth slammed the table, irritated.
Anyway, I'll find work eventually. Keep it a secret until then.
I believed Kenneth and decided not to tell his parents. But 2 years passed, and he never left his part-time lifestyle. He even began hopping from one part-time job to another, earning $800 a month and calling it his allowance.
We can live on your salary just fine, no problem, right?
Lately, Kenneth had been saying things like that, leaving me to pay all the living expenses. At first, I kept asking for his share and managed to get it somehow. But gradually, these transactions became too bothersome, and I ended up bearing all the costs myself. Continuing this way, I increasingly felt the futility of Kenneth's presence. I often wondered if there was any point in staying married. Still, I continued the marriage, unable to forget the smiles on my parents' face when our engagement was decided. However, an incident occurred that trampled on all my feelings. The call's not going through. One day, when Kenneth didn't return home after his part-time job, I tried calling him, but he never picked up. Maybe he went to his parents' house or out drinking again. He'll probably be back tomorrow. It wasn't unusual for Kenneth to return home in the morning, so initially I wasn't too concerned. However, 2 days passed without Kenneth coming home or any contact from him. That was certainly odd, and I decided to call his parents' house. But I couldn't reach them either, and they didn't call back. Could something serious have happened? The thought of contacting the police crossed my mind. It was about 3 days since I lost contact with Kenneth when suddenly I received a call from my mother-in-law. "If you move in with us, I'll tell you where my son's new house is. He's earning $8,000 a month." Who's making $8,000 a month? I couldn't believe mother-in-law's words. Kenneth must have been bragging and lying again. I kept silent because he didn't want to worry me, but I had no intention of continuing a marriage that made me a laughingstock. Then it's divorce with my husband, who actually earns $800. "Don't lie." Mother-in-law laughed loudly on the other end of the phone. "Well, I'm not bothered by her misunderstanding. I'll send the divorce papers tomorrow. You'll struggle with your poor life, not me." Goodbye. I hung up the phone, leaving mother-in-law in her triumph. After hearing about the divorce from mother-in-law, Kenneth's calls flooded my phone, so I decided to block his number. I wonder who will end up regretting this. I savored my tea, enjoying my newfound freedom. I'm looking forward to what lies ahead for us three. The next morning, I left the house early. I had already changed the locks yesterday. Even if Kenneth returned, he wouldn't be able to enter. Around noon, I checked my mobile phone and, as expected, found calls from mother-in-law. I also had several voicemail messages, so I listened to them with my earphones. The messages were not from mother-in-law, but Kenneth. "Hey, the locks are changed, and I can't get in. Come back right now." At first, the messages were like that, but gradually, they turned into soft pleas against divorce and urging me to come home. I saved them all and booked a room in a nearby city hotel. After work, I moved to the hotel and sent a message to mother-in-law. "The divorce papers have already been mailed. That house is my family home, so Kenneth, now a stranger, can't enter. His belongings have already been shipped." Mother-in-law called me multiple times immediately after, but I ignored them all, assuming it was Kenneth calling. Then I received a message. "Divorce isn't good. You and I are connected by the thread of destiny. Let's join hands again. It's not too late." I almost spit out my coffee at the sheer creepiness of this message. I never thought Kenneth had a way with words, but this was disastrously bad. I replied to Kenneth, barely holding back laughter. "I'm sorry, but our relationship is over. Please return the divorce papers promptly." Soon after, more creepy messages came from Kenneth, but I just laughed them off in bed and ignored them. The next day, I took a day off work and went to see a lawyer friend of mine. He's known Kenneth since our university days, and agreed to take my case immediately after I explained the situation. I prepared all the necessary documents and also presented evidence I had been quietly gathering over the years. With my friend's consent, I set the date for the final showdown with Kenneth. When I informed Kenneth, he quickly agreed to come to the discussion. He also sent messages pleading for reconciliation, but I ignored them, ending the conversation with, "See you on the day." On the day, Kenneth and his parents showed up with an unexpectedly confident demeanor. "Have you reflected properly? It's been enough time to cool your head, right? Maybe it's time to come back home." "That's right. Our home is so lovely." Mother-in-law chimed in. I just smiled and nodded at the two of them. Kenneth's face turned pale when he saw the person standing next to me. "What? Why is he here?" "I hired him," I responded. "That's not fair." "I don't understand what you mean." Kenneth glared at me, clenching his teeth in frustration. Amidst this, mother-in-law with a smile spoke up. "Oh, Harper, that's not right." "What isn't?" "Being with another man while you're still married. This must be infidelity, right? How much will the bond for the divorce trial be? I wonder." Mother-in-law's baseless accusations made both my friend and me chuckle. My friend took out our contact from his bag and explained it to mother-in-law. After hearing everything, mother-in-law became furious. "What? A lawyer? Don't overstep your bounds as a wife." "I'm paying with my money, and it's my right. You're welcome to hire one too." Mother-in-law looked displeased at the logical response. Being frugal, she likely wouldn't approve of spending so much on a lawyer. Then Kenneth turned to my friend with a smile.
I have an idea. If you represent me too, we can resolve this, right?
What are you saying? It's impossible to contract with both sides.
Shut up. You just keep quiet.
Kenneth glared at me as he said this. I showed Kenneth the claim documents for the divorce bond. He skimmed them, and his face turned even paler.
What's this?
Just what it looks like. The claim documents for the divorce bond detailed his failure to contribute to living expenses, not coming home, and not helping with housework, misuse of joint savings, and infidelity.
Did you know about this?
I thought it was obvious enough that you weren't trying to hide it. At my words, Kenneth's face went pale, and he trembled. I discovered the misuse of our joint savings about a year ago. Kenneth had insisted on managing that account since we got married, so I had left it to him. The account was one I hadn't used, and I hadn't made a card for withdrawals. But feeling uneasy about Kenneth's extravagant spending, I registered for online banking and checked the statements. My fears were confirmed. The withdrawals on Kenneth's debit card were coming from that account every month. So you're going to pay back what you spent, right?
Half of that is mine, isn't it?
Well, yes, but the account is mine, and you haven't deposited anything for years. Kenneth's irritation was evident. The way he occasionally glanced at me, as if gauging my reaction. Once, such gestures might have seemed like he wanted forgiveness, or was waiting for a moment of reconciliation. But such gestures from a 45-year-old man are neither cute nor anything else. Kenneth, disliking my unimpressed demeanor, clicked his tongue dramatically and started speaking arrogantly.
Basically, you don't respect your husband, which is fundamental. That's why I was letting it slide with money.
His self-centered reasoning made my temples throb. What should I do with this fool? While pondering this, I pulled out evidence of his infidelity from my bag. It seems you've been having quite a lot of fun with various girls.
This is your fault.
What? His nonsensical claim made me ask again. Then mother-in-law, who had been listening, started speaking triumphantly. Kenneth is popular. He doesn't need someone like you. He has a high income, good looks, and above all, he's kind. Except he's not kind to his wife. Apparently, mother-in-law didn't find my interjection amusing. Her face turned red with anger as she shouted, "That's because you're a charmless wife. If you were young and cute like those girls in the photos, Kenneth would be kind to you." Mother-in-law said this, pulling Kenneth's arm. Kenneth, looking utterly drained of blood from his face, nodded slightly, but was clearly gauging my reaction. When I got the chance to speak, I didn't hesitate to pull out new evidence from my bag and show it to mother-in-law. "Your proud son here? He's not getting any attention in the club unless he pays, you know? What's the meaning of this?" Mother-in-law snatched the photo from me and confronted Kenneth with it. Kenneth, seemingly out of energy to make excuses, just looked down. Just as the photo shows, Kenneth's been hanging out with club girls. He's there every day, splurging money on them. Mother-in-law, her eyes darting around, froze while gripping Kenneth's arm.
"The affairs. I just wanted Harper to be jealous, to miss me. I was lonely. Sorry, I'll stop."
I flipped through my documents as Kenneth desperately tried to explain. Then I showed them another piece of evidence, printed messages Kenneth had sent to the girls. "So you've been promising these girls that you'll divorce your wife, get a lot of money from the distribution of property, and then marry them and lavish them with luxury, huh?" I read out loud, and Kenneth, visibly shaken, snatched the paper from my hand and crumpled it up. "You can crumple that all you want. I have plenty more."
"Is this some kind of harassment?"
"No, just showing you the facts." Kenneth gritted his teeth at my words, but realizing he couldn't win against me, he just clenched his fists and glared. Then, father-in-law, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up.
"This all happened because Harper didn't give him attention. It's her fault, isn't it? Affairs are a sign of a man's worth, after all."
What era is he living in? I looked at father-in-law in disbelief. He seemed proud of himself, as if he had said something smart. "You say it's a sign of worth, but Kenneth doesn't have that kind of money. Using his wife's money to impress other women is pretty pathetic, right?" I thought I was making a valid point, but father-in-law just burst into laughter. I tilted my head in confusion.
"You used Kenneth's salary for living expenses, right? That's how you managed to save that much money. Just a part-timer trying to overstep her boundaries, huh?"
"Who said I was a part-timer?" I looked at Kenneth with irritation. As soon as our eyes met, he quickly looked away. I realized something in his demeanor. Do you know what my job is?
You work part-time at an accounting firm, right?
No, I'm an accountant. And also the president of the firm.
Stop bragging.
No, it's the truth. I handed my business card to father-in-law. I've never been so glad to carry business cards with me all the time. Father-in-law read my card, looking incredulous, then turned to me.
This isn't fake, is it?
This is real, and my friends here can vouch for that. As my friend nodded, father-in-law turned pale. I decided to drop another bombshell. Kenneth's income of $8,000, that was mine, wasn't it?
What?
Look, here's Kenneth's pay stub. I handed father-in-law the pay stub, and he cautiously looked at it. Mother-in-law peeked over his shoulder, too. Their faces turned bright red in an instant. Kenneth, you lied!
Hey, what's this about $800? What happened to the company you worked for?
Kenneth, cornered by his parents, looked at me with pleading eyes. I decided to help him. Kenneth resigned suddenly a few years ago. He said he believed there were other jobs suited for him. Well, it seems he hasn't found one in these years. Kenneth looked at me with a look of despair. I returned his gaze with a smile. If she hadn't been earning well, you wouldn't have suggested moving in together.
Apologize to Harper right now. There's still time.
Listening to the in-law's selfish reasoning, Kenneth started apologizing to me. But seeing him like that, my heart remained unmoved.
Harper, I'm sorry. I messed up. I'll look for a job. I'll work. So let's try again, you and me.
What? No way. Kenneth gaped at me, surprised by my blunt response. He probably thought an apology would make me forgive him. Unfortunately, I don't need a costly roommate in my life. I used to forgive you because I loved you, but there's no love left for you now.
That's harsh.
Kenneth collapsed on the floor, crying. No one comforted him, and everyone looked on with cold stares. Harper, I'm sorry. We had no idea. But can you reconsider the divorce?
Yes. Isn't divorce too hasty? We'll live together and straighten Kenneth out.
Hearing in-laws still trying to force a divorce reversal and cohabitation, I was beyond appalled. Why should I forgive Kenneth and live with you? The in-laws stuttered, desperately trying to answer my legitimate question.
Well, you know, Harper, you don't have parents. We consider you our real daughter.
Yes, it's lonely being alone, isn't it? Their claim of seeing me as their real daughter didn't please me at all. In fact, it disgusted me. My feelings must have shown on my face because the in-laws continued, looking frightened. Look, we could go shopping, have lunch. Let's live together happily from now on.
Right, living together. We'll surely understand each other better.
Hearing this, I finally burst into loud laughter. In-laws and Kenneth looked at me in stunned silence. How funny. Live happily? Understand each other? No joke. I don't need a cheating husband, a pretentious father-in-law, and a bragging mother-in-law. My words turned the in-laws' faces red, but then mother-in-law's face went pale. A cheating husband and father-in-law? Yes, didn't you notice? It's not just Kenneth who's been unfaithful. With that, I took out the last piece of evidence from my bag. Mother-in-law's face turned to one of horror as she saw the photos. You're still continuing this?
Why do you have these photos?
Actually, I had incidentally witnessed father-in-law's affair when going to commission a cheating investigation. Thinking it could be useful, I had taken photos as evidence. You said you had broken it off that time.
No, wait. This is a misunderstanding.
What misunderstanding? Where did you go wearing the tie I gave you? Kenneth was flustered as the two argued. I handed Kenneth the divorce papers. Can you sign these now? The previous ones weren't returned.
You're really going through with the divorce?
Of course. Hurry up and sign. Kenneth signed the divorce papers, crying. I said goodbye to him and ignored the still quarreling in-laws leaving the place. After that, I went straight to the office to submit the divorce papers. I was finally free, legally and in spirit. Kenneth managed to get a full-time job through mid-career recruitment. but his salary was half of what he used to make, and his working hours were double. He cried every day, wanting to quit. Years of part-time work had made him think he could easily return to his previous status. His classmate, who told me this, was appalled at his convenient thinking. Moreover, once Kenneth's mistresses found out he had no money, they disappeared. Predictably, it wasn't Kenneth, but his money that had attracted them. Shocked, Kenneth confronted them at a club, only to be scolded by intimidating men, and since then, he hasn't dared to return. The house he moved to, paid for with my savings, soon became too expensive for him to maintain, and he was kicked out. Now he lives crammed in a small 4-room apartment with his parents. They divorced after a huge fight, but lacking the funds to live separately, they live together on Kenneth's salary. Father-in-law's affair partner was mother-in-law's classmate, and their affair came to light when Kenneth was a child. It seemed they continued their relationship under the radar. However, this time, the affair partner decided to leave father-in-law for good. Like Kenneth, father-in-law had been squandering his time on women, leaving him with no savings. It was no surprise that mother-in-law and father-in-law constantly fought about money and women issues, sometimes even involving the police. They become known as the neighborhood nuisance, struggling to find part-time work and relying on meager pension. As for me, my business is going well, and I've even increased my staff, feeling the need to tighten up more than ever. Additionally, a friend has become my consulting lawyer, giving me peace of mind to entrust important matters. In my personal life, I started keeping cats. Since Kenneth disliked animals, I had refrained from getting a pet, but now there was no need to hold back, so I happily adopted one. I made one room in my new house cat-friendly, installing a cat tower and other amenities. Even when tired from work, my cat provides comfort and motivation. The cat has brought a healthy balance to my life, and lately my work performance has been exceptionally good. I'm even considering adopting a second cat. Additionally, there's someone I've recently started to find interesting. The person I've recently started to find interesting is a friend who also became my consulting lawyer. He's a classmate from college, and to be honest, I had never thought of him in that way before. But he listened to me talk about my post-divorce feelings until morning and took me out for meals, even introducing me to my beloved cat. The cat has become fond of him, and I sometimes invite him over on my days off. His calm manner makes him a comforting and trustworthy presence. It's hard not to fall for someone like that. Recently, I felt that he might have feelings for me too. Perhaps a new spring is just around the corner. All right, let's do our best today, I said to myself in the mirror, tying my favorite scarf. This routine always gets me fired up the most. Tonight, I have a dinner date with him, so no overtime is allowed. I'm determined to express my gratitude and feelings today. With that resolve, I left my house. The sky was blue. I hoped my life would be as bright and beautiful as this sky. With that thought, I headed to work again today.